This should be a quick video as I'm going to show how I make what are called stained glass windows. There are different recipes online you can get for these. I'm just going to show you the simple way that I make them. The first thing you need is a bag of multicolored mini marshmallows. These can be difficult to find as you get close to the holidays. If you plan on making these, it's worth it to get them ahead of time as you find them, or you may have to look online to find them. These ones I had to order online because the store had stopped stocking them. They had instead switched entirely to the white only marshmallows, and you can do this with just the white mini marshmallows, but you won't get the slightly varied flavors or the different colors. The whole point of the stained glass window recipe is that when you cut them, you get a cross section of different colored marshmallows, and so that adds to the visual appeal. So this is a 10-ounce bag. The other thing we'll need is a bag of chocolate. So here I am using a 10-ounce bag of dark chocolate. If you get the semi-sweet morsels, I believe it's 12 ounces typically. That's fine. It'll just be a little bit more chocolate between your marshmallows. But the 10-ounce bag of dark chocolate, if you prefer dark chocolate, works out just fine for this recipe. In addition to that, I'm going to put in some hazelnuts. This was a 6-ounce bag of hazelnuts, and I am going to put half of the bag in. So that's 3 ounces of chopped nuts, and then we'll have some coconut that we're going to use later. So I just typically leave it like this with the nuts just resting on top. That way when I pour the chocolate onto here, it'll hit the nuts first and not the marshmallows. That'll help, one, the nuts not sink to the bottom as easily, and two, reduce the contact that the hot chocolate has with the marshmallows before I start mixing it. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to take the chocolate and we're going to melt it. So you want to use a double boiler for this. So a double boiler is just a pot with water and another pot that is metal on top, that the water will heat the top pot or the top mixing bowl and melt your chocolate. You do it this way and not like directly in a saucepan, because the boiling water reaches a set temperature as it reaches its boiling point and does not go typically above that. And so as a result, the steam from the water will heat the bowl to a pretty even temperature, which will help prevent your chocolate from scorching against a pot. You can technically melt chocolate in a pot directly. You just have to be careful and you have to watch it. Before this, I'm just going to cut this open. Again. So for this, you just put a small amount of water on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a pretty small amount. We just need to get it to boil and get the steam, and we'll go to that point behind me on the stove. So here on the stove, sometimes I have trouble with that burner. So here on the stove, I'm just going to let the water go for a bit on high so we can get to a boil. Once that happens, I will put the chocolate bowl with chocolate on top and get it going. You want to get it to a boil first because see how, I don't know if you can see it, at the bottom you may be able to see that the flames are licking around the sides a little bit, so that the circle of flame is a little bit wider than the pot. I don't want to put the chocolate on now, because if I put the chocolate on now, I risk heat coming up from the sides of the pot and hitting the bowl directly. What I want is I want it on a boil, and I want the steam only heating the bowl. Now that I've got it starting to boil and I've got the bubbles forming on the bottom, I can turn the heat down slightly and cover it. I'm just turning the heat down to maybe a medium high so that I still get enough heat to produce steam from the water, but not enough that I'm going to get the heat on the sides. And for this, I also typically will use just a metal spoon because it's metal pot or metal bowl. So this will just be easier to clean than if I was using something that was plastic, even if it was heat resistant. But the chocolate won't get hot enough to worry about it. I could use the spatula that I'm going to use later. I just find that a smaller spoon rather than a large spatula is easier to start moving the chocolate around. You can see it's starting to melt on the bottom already. So as it starts to go, you just stir it so that the bits that haven't had contact with the heat start to. As you get more and more of a liquid chocolate, it'll be easier to coat them with melted chocolate and get it to melt faster. There we go. And one thing I will do as I lift this off to pour it into the other bowl, what I'm going to do is I'll take a kitchen towel and wipe the steam, the water that's collected on the bottom off. Just I don't want water dripping into the chocolate that I'm going to be mixing up. Water can cause melted chocolate to seize up and turn grainy, so you want to avoid getting that in the final product. So now we have our bowl. I'm going to grab the melted chocolate off of the stove. Just be careful, the bowl is heating since it is metal, so if it gets a little too hot to handle, you may want to use a glove or a hot pad. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to mix it with the spatula, so I'm going to get the chocolate off of the spoon. So if you have a temperature resistant spatula, you can always use that to melt when you're melting the chocolate, so you can avoid any possible lost chocolate. Though there will be some in the bowl that's hard to get off. So I just use a spatula to get it out. I go directly on the nuts that I add to this recipe, just because I don't want the marshmallows to prematurely melt. I want them to stay whole. The easiest way is to reduce the amount of heat they come in contact with. Got most of the chocolate out, and I'm going to spread it out a little bit and then just start folding it into the marshmallows. And you want to just work it enough to get all the marshmallows covered so you don't really see the colored bits anymore, and the nuts mixed in. Once you get to that point, which is really quick right there, we're going to form it. So the way you do this is you need to make a log, and that is done with aluminum foil. So you typically need more aluminum foil than you think, so I will just get a good amount. It'll vary how much you need by how thick you let it be. Because we're going to take this and we're going to pull it out onto the aluminum foil. And I just messed that up. So the first thing you need to do, this should be okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. So one thing you need to do before you do that is you need to put coconut down on the tin foil. Technically you don't have to, but it is recommended. What this is going to do is going to create a barrier. Does two things. One, it creates a barrier between the tin foil and the final product. It makes it easier to take the tin foil off. It also gives it a nice area to hold on the outside, a decorative outside to hold onto when you are cutting it and serving it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Most of this is to make sure it doesn't stick too bad. And just... So it's okay if it comes out in kind of fits and starts like little bits and pieces. You're going to use the tin foil to press it together back into a log before we put it in the fridge. What I usually do at this point, let me clean my fingers, is pull up the sides and let kind of any excess kind of move down. At this point, if it's too thick, you're going to press down in the area. I like to have enough here that I can close it by bending the tin foil. That way there's less creases along the tin foil. The areas of the tin foil that kind of crinkle up are going to be areas of the tin foil that are harder to pull off of the final product. You push the ends in as you hold it together. I'll let you close up the top. Try to get two folds on here because one really won't hold it in place. You don't need it to really hold. What you need it to do is be enough so you get the ends folded up. And we're going to stick this whole log in the fridge until it's solidified. Once it is cold enough to handle, to be able to feel that it's come back together into more of a solid mass, you want the chocolate to be re-solidified. And you're just going to peel off the aluminum foil. Now if you're not going to cut all of it at once, what I'd recommend is that you peel off the aluminum foil and then replace the aluminum foil, get new aluminum foil to cover whatever's left. That will just make it easier in the future. But once you get it peeled off, it's pretty easy to handle. And so the ends will typically be a little hard to cut. They don't firm up as well, but you can see the nuts and the different colors, thus the name stained glass windows. Now I usually cut these about around 1 centimeter thick. You'll get at least probably 15 to 20 pieces out of this one recipe.